Go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Suzanne Pagan, and I'm the Assistant Director at the Center for the New Energy Economy. And the center is housed at Colorado State University and was started by our director, Governor Bill Ritter, who you've seen on some of these webinars. And he started the center when he left office in 2011. And today we're holding the 7th out of 8 webinars in our Energy Transition Academy series. So thanks for sticking with us. I'm learning more each time, and I hope you guys are, those of you who have been tuning in, I hope you're also expanding your network of people and getting to know about new opportunities and learning along with me. So if you've missed the webinars that we've had, the recorded webinars, we'll put a link to that in the chat so you can go back and listen to some of those if you're interested. And the webinars that were not recorded are our discussion webinars, like the one that we just had this past Tuesday. So our very last one in this series of 8 is next Tuesday. It's at the same time at 10 a.m. Mountain Time, and it will not be recorded because we'll have a bit of Q&A that might carry over from today, and then Governor Ritter will be there to facilitate a wrap-up session with all of us, and that will be about what comes next for coal communities. So there are 5 that are going to be recorded, and then 3 discussion sessions that are not recorded. And as we tend to have new people on our webinars each time, I want to remind everyone that we're starting with the realization that there is an energy transition happening across the country. There are about 200 communities that are facing coal mine and coal plant closures within the next decade. And we're here to talk about not why the energy transition is happening around the country and around the world, but how we can help coal workers and their families and their communities so that their towns are not so heavily dependent on one industry in the future, and they can help their local economies be resilient or stay resilient, some are there already, with places with family sustaining jobs as well. And as I've said before, if your town is not transitioning yet, and we have heard from a few of you that your town is not transitioning yet, you are in the lucky position to be able to do proactive preparation for whatever changes are coming, because we do know that things will keep changing. So today we have a federal speaker and then state speakers from Wyoming and Colorado. And then we have 2 more locally focused speakers from the New Mexico side of Navajo and also from Utah. And they'll be focusing on investing in the workforce that's transitioning now or within the next decade. So let's see, this slide shows kind of ground rules for the topic because it can be politically charged and it can be emotional. We know, so we kind of put these ground rules up there, and I'm sure all of you follow these anyway on all of your Zoom calls. So today's panel is really about investing in your workforce for the future, and we'll hear from people who know how to do this and can help do this with the funding opportunities and other programs that they have. And the session will be moderated by Shelley Simon, who is the Program Manager for Workforce Transition at Colorado's Office of Just Transition. She works with Colorado coal communities to support workers who are laid off from the coal industry or related businesses in securing good new jobs with family sustaining incomes and who are pursuing other pathways to maintain financial security. So thanks for being here, Shelley, and I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Good to see you all here. And I appreciate the opportunity to be able to share a little bit about what is going on in Colorado, as well as introduce some wonderful speakers for the rest of the time we're here together. So I work in the Office of Just Transition in the state of Colorado, and my position is focused specifically on the workforce, on people who will potentially be at a loss of jobs in the next decade due to the transition away from coal. I've been with the office for about a year, and during that past year, I've had the opportunity to get out into northwestern Colorado quite a bit to do more qualitative research and speaking with people one-on-one in small groups and semi-structured interviews to learn a little bit more about what are some of the major themes in terms of people's concerns and hopes and dreams for their families and themselves and their communities. The workers that I've met with tend to be very community focused. So oftentimes they will share their concerns about the community before they'll even share their own individual concerns about them and their families. And so the communities tend to be very tightly knit. And this will definitely bring some huge changes for people. Some of the major themes that we've heard in speaking with folks in northwestern Colorado, which is a pretty rural area, and the closures would have a significant impact on the economy and the communities, is that most people do want to try and stay in the community. They don't necessarily want to relocate, and they're hoping that there'll be job opportunities that replace or come close to replacing their current income, as well as utilizing the skills that they bring to the table. A lot of folks are already currently running their own businesses on the side, or interested in starting their own businesses as well, and wanting to learn more about how to do that. Families are really concerned about how closures will impact the community, and potentially, if they have children, the quality of education and other resources in the community. And then they're also thinking about what are their next career steps. If they don't stay in the coal industry, some folks are getting out and learning more about, for example, like the fire service, or being a first responder, or construction, or like I said, their own business. They're also thinking about, their partners and spouses, and what they might do as well, and how that will impact them staying in the community or not. They're also concerned about changes in their health insurance and lapse in their benefits, and what will that look like potentially. We also encounter quite a few folks who are still very skeptical about whether the closures will take place, whether the transition will take place, and what that time frame looks like. And then there's also, and a lot of folks are just waiting to see what'll happen. So some folks are not currently taking steps, but they're thinking about, I'm going to ride this out and see what happens in the future. And then the other thing too is we're just seeing as more maybe significant strain on resources in the community, particularly nonprofit organizations potentially losing funding because donations are decreasing for nonprofit work, as well as an increase in service utilization around substance use, domestic violence, suicide attempts, assault. And so a lot of stress for a lot of families across the community, whether they're directly related to coal or not. And so they're seeing a lot of utilization of services that way as well. So this has been a wonderful process because we've gotten to meet a lot of folks and speak with them one-on-one. We're also in the process of launching a survey to collect some quantitative information, just get some more information at once from people. And we're launching that survey currently at 2 mines and a plant in northwestern Colorado. And that survey includes questions, asking people what are their plans, what are their skill sets, what are they going to stay in the community or not? What types of jobs might they be interested in? What are their biggest concerns for their family? And so just gathering information, kind of a broader sense, so that we have that along with some of the qualitative information to bring together and to help inform some type of plan for folks for the transition. And, one of the best practices is that people are involved in their own program design to make it more meaningful and more useful to them and their families. So our plan would be to bring this data back to communities and inform what helpful transition services or resources might look like. So that's a lot of what we've been doing, gathering information from the field, and then also talking with researchers and other people from other impacted communities to learn, what are their lessons learned, what's worked for them, what hasn't, what is policy saying, what's research saying about energy transition and coal transition specifically around the country and the world. So that's what we've been focused on. And then I'd like to introduce perhaps our next speaker, unless there's anything I should know about in the interim. I don't think so. I'm checking my chat. Okay. So our next speaker is going to be Molly Bechet. She's the policy advisor in employment assistance and training with the Department of Labor in Washington, D.C. She's held a wide range of other policy positions, including working on issues such as building equitable pathways to quality training and employment, the future of work and public trust in government institutions, and also community economic development and education and workforce policy. Molly, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great, thank you so much. Thanks, Shelley, for the introduction, and also thank you for laying the groundwork for this conversation. I feel like I have a better understanding of where this group has been and where this conversation has been going over the last weeks and months. So I appreciate the interest. I'm going to share some slides, so give me one moment to make sure that that happens successfully. Let's see. All right, can you all see my slide?
No, but let me.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, you can try again.
All right, I will. Okay, how about now?
Yep, there we go.
Okay, success. All right. Okay, so I'll just kick off. So hi again, everyone. My name is Molly Bechet. I'm a policy advisor with the Department of Labor in our Employment and Training Administration. My portfolio ranges a bit, but I focus on some of our climate investments, energy, our collaboration with the Department of Energy, and also a lot of these new investments that are coming out of the federal family, including the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the Inflation Reduction Act, and also the CHIPS and Science Act. So there is some coordination there with what we're talking about today, and I will certainly touch on that and what I'm bringing to the conversation today. And also, I think I saw a few questions in the chat or a couple of items bubbling up, but feel free, Shelley, to stop me with a question if it comes up, or if we want to save those to the end, whichever you all prefer. You're the conductor here. All right, clicking along. So essentially here, I only have about 8 minutes, so I want to give you guys just an overview, and you all will also have the slides sent to you following. So I just want to give you guys an overview of a couple of funding opportunities and what sort of resources essentially the Department of Labor has available, specifically for energy communities and for communities undergoing an energy transition. I've focused my remarks or the opportunities that I'm offering you all, I guess, today on dislocated worker grants and also work opportunity for rural communities. I know, Shelley, you mentioned there's a little bit that's some of a focus also that we've had. But I also want to mention upcoming opportunity specific to infrastructure and infrastructure to include energy transition. And also take a moment to talk about some of those other federal investments I mentioned, like the Infrastructure CHIPS IRA, and then also make a plug for a framework that DOL has offered to help communities, community-based organizations, employers, workforce boards, what have you, build partnerships that allow them to be better prepared, better resourced to access federal funding and create long-lasting partnerships that allow for sustainability of that funding and the sustainability of those workforce development pipeline, opportunity pipeline, training opportunities, and make sure that there's some longevity to have some real lasting impact, not only on the economy, but in the community and how people can live well, accessing good jobs. So just to kick off, I'm not sure how many people are aware. It seems like the dislocated worker grants in the Department of Labor can be a best kept secret, but that is by no means how we want it to stay. So I want to share with you all the National Dislocated Worker Grants. They're discretionary grants. They're under WIOA, the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, which is the backbone of the public workforce system. And by and large, there are 4 big categories there. There are disaster dislocated worker grants, There are layoff DWGs, service member DWGs, and trade adjustment DWGs. So these grants, by and large, are available to communities that are undergoing dramatic transition. So that could be in the case of a disaster, a hurricane hits. Recently, we've awarded these grants to Kentucky. We've awarded these grants to Florida. We are waiting in the wings in case Hawaii happens to need a dislocated worker grant. I think you all heard about the eruptions of the volcanoes that recently happened. So in the event that those are needed, the state workforce board can call on DOL to say, hey, we've had this event, we need this additional funding stream to help support our communities going through and weathering this disruption. So I'll say dislocated worker grants, the most frequent, I guess, incidents that we happen to see are the disaster DWGs and the layoff DWGs. For this event, this webinar, and the people that we have here on the call, I think perhaps the layoff DWGs may be most pertinent when we're talking about energy transition. And I'll click through, and I don't want anyone to be put off by the large wall of text that you're about to see, but this is hopefully, again, to be a resource after this conversation. But I did want to dig in a little bit more into the layoff DWGs and a little bit of context for those. For the employment recovery or layoff DWGs, that's an instance where there's maybe a mass layoff, there's a plant closure affecting 50 or more work-offs, or it could be an industry-wide event, or it can be any sort of event that's tied to economic recovery where there is an outsized community impact, where multiple small dislocations are occurring. And I think you can start to see when we're talking about an energy transition, how that overlap starts to occur. So in the event that any of those sort of qualifying events are happening within a state or local workforce development board can apply for those funds. Also, DWGs are also awarded to any sort of entity that qualifies for funding under the Indian and Native American program for workforce development funding. And then those participants are any dislocated workers who happen to be impacted by that layoff, that plant closure, the community impact, the industry-wide layoff. So there is a pretty broad interpretation. It's really about connecting with the state, connecting with your tribal entity, connecting with your local board, and articulating the need to the Department of Labor in that application. This could also be reaching out to your regional Department of Labor office, and then having that conversation, initiating that call, explaining the situation, explaining the economic impact, and then starting to have that conversation about this is the impact that we're feeling in our community. This is how we would like to move forward. We would like to draw down on those recovery grants and those recovery dislocated worker grants. So again, apologies for the wall of text, but there was a lot of good information that I wanted you all to be able to have in some sort of accessible form. So I'll just pause there and hope that that is helpful for you all moving forward. Another opportunity is the workforce opportunity for rural communities. This is also actually out of that same pot of money with the dislocated worker grants. However, this one is specific to rural communities. So the work grants, as we call them, or work initiative, is actually managed in partnership with the Appalachian Regional Commission and the Delta Regional Authority. So I'll note, presently, there isn't an overlap with the communities that you all serve, but I will say we have so far gone through 4 rounds of the work grants, and they have been very popular. And there is also an overlap specifically with energy communities. I did note of the 50 work grants that were awarded in the last 2 fiscal years, more than half of those were awarded to energy communities. So I'll just say that the work grants and who we're focusing on, who has applied for these grants, has evolved. And over the 4 rounds that we've done over the 4 fiscal years. So moving forward, if this is something that seems to match the need of your region, that's something that can be articulated to your regional offices, to your state. And that's information that's very valuable for us to hear at the federal level to understand if there is this need, if there is this desire for this sort of initiative to be expanded in its sort of, I guess, regional footprint. Again, that's information that's very useful for us to know about for future grant cycles and for us to consider when we're initiating the next round of work grants.
Hey, Molly, I just had a quick
Yeah.
question.
Uh-huh.
For the dislocated worker program, just a couple questions, actually. One is, have any grants gone out to coworkers yet?
I can pull some information and get you guys that back. I don't have that off the top of my head, unfortunately. But I can say the work grants have previously gone to co-workers. I know there was one in West Virginia, but again, it has a specific Delta and Appalachian focus at the moment. So
Okay.
not presently in your region, but it has gone to Energy Communities has gone to co-workers previously.
But this region would be eligible.
For DWGs, certainly.
Okay, and then how far in advance can you apply for those grants? Can you apply with kind of a preventative focus, or do you have to wait until that dislocation happens?
As soon as there is some sort of notice or understanding or awareness that a plant closure is imminent, you can start to have that conversation with your state, with your local board, with your region, and they can tell you exactly when that funding cycle is coming up, and then they can tell you what the timeline is for applying. But as soon as you have knowledge of something upcoming, you don't have to wait until there is a separation, because at that point, you know, you're losing vital time to actually support an individual, to support a family. But as soon as you have some notice, you can start to have that conversation.
Great, thank you.
Sure thing. Okay, and I don't want to eat up too much more time, but I also want to plug an upcoming funding opportunity. So this funding opportunity out of DOL is presently forecasted, hoping to be released in January. It has an infrastructure focus about creating sector partnerships in infrastructure related sectors. So of that, any number of energy sectors, manufacturing could be involved in that. And I will say there is a lot of opportunity not only for partnership, but for embedding the application and the sort of explanation of your grant and how you would like to, or excuse me, of your project and how you would like to form it, and articulating why it is needed, how you, and why it's needed and how it best fits your community in your context. We've, I think, intentionally left a lot of the description vague, because the hope here is to create that best fit and make sure that we're funding place-based partnerships, place-based sector initiatives, and where they happen to already exist, scaling them so that they can have a wider impact, and especially if they're serving historically underserved communities. I can also follow up and share, you'll see the forecasted opportunity is at the bottom, but when that full opportunity is posted, I would love to share that so you all can have that in hand as well. And I'll close out shortly. There are numerous federal investments coming out of the bipartisan infrastructure law, out of Inflation Reduction Act, and CHIPS and Science Act. I've added just a smattering below. These are all coming out of the Inflation Reduction Act, and these are purely illustrative because, again, there are so many. But I want to just put a plug in that there are numerous opportunities and a really demonstrated need for workforce investments and workforce partnerships that connect to all of these millions and sometimes billions of dollars that are flowing out of the federal government that support environmental and climate justice, energy transition, and what have you. Again, there's a administration-wide priority to focus on equity, focus on job quality, focus on the longevity of the workforce, and a talent pipeline that is sustainable and uplifts communities where they happen to be. I would love to speak to you all in future. I don't have the full time to maybe devote to this content right now, but I do want to just put a plug in that there is some enormous opportunity, and you should absolutely be engaged.
Thank you so much, Molly. Do you want? Were you finished? Do you just want to wrap up?
Oh, well, This is just something about building partnerships, and we have a framework which I can offer, but I don't want to take too much more time. But again, to access some of that federal funding, we did create a partnership framework that gives that information, gives that sort of template for states and locals of how to help operationalize and help build their case to access some of that funding.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks. And if anybody has more questions for Molly, we can certainly hopefully get to them at the end of today or next week. Okay. Next, I would like to introduce Robin Cooley. She's the Director of Workforce Services in Wyoming. Robin Cooley was appointed in March of 2019 by the governor in her state as the director of the Wyoming Department of Workforce Services. She's also served on the Wyoming State Board of Equalization, on the Wyoming Public Service Commission, and she's also worked for almost 2 decades with the Wyoming Attorney General's office. And Robin, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me here. I've been in several of these academies, and I think this is a wonderful opportunity. And I just have to say that the history of these conversations, as I've been in my position, have changed so dramatically in Wyoming. It's been so wonderful to see. I've been in my position probably 4 years. And I have to tell you, the first time I was asked to start one of these conversations or to be in one of these conversations around just transition, I was actually advised probably not to take part in that, because just transition was a dirty phrase, a dirty word in Wyoming. But I went ahead and did it anyway, because I thought, you know what? That's not a political issue to me. That is an issue of workforce. That is an issue that's my responsibility as the Director of Workforce Services. And so I took part in it, and I have ever since, every opportunity I've gotten, because it's that critical to the state of Wyoming. So thank you again for having me here. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, if I can do that. There we go. All right, can you see my screen? All right, very good. I'm going to go through this real quick. I've got a lot of information, and I think maybe we're running behind just a little bit. But I wanted to just give you some ideas about what Wyoming is doing now that we're really moving forward with this idea about helping our workers really take some of their transferable skills and reach out and start looking at some opportunities for other good careers that they can that they can work into if that's what they're interested in doing in Wyoming. And so we've started developing all of these really great partnerships around the state with education, workforce, and industry, and it's really been a remarkable thing to see. First off, though, we've got our workforce centers around the state. We've got 18 of them now. And of course, that's where we interact with all our WIOA funding opportunities. And we've done a tremendous job there with some of the dislocated workers funds and the power funds from DOL as well, that helped initially with some of the coal closures that we saw initially. But that's kind of where we start, is in our workforce centers with the assistance that they can provide, but also an initiative that the governor started was this WIP Innovation Partnership. And that's where he recognized that we really need to pull together these partnerships. And so it started with pulling together our university and our community colleges to recognize that they're not always aligned. They're not always speaking to each other about what our industry needs. So that when we have our workers that need to recognize the need is there to really develop the education and the training opportunities for these workers we're not always aligning those two together. So the WHIP initiative was developed, and these are some of their strategies that they've developed together to start supporting some of those workers. And of course, we've got our Workforce Development Council, and this is the council that is developed through the WIOA program. But we've got a number of members that serve on that voluntarily through it with industry. We've got legislators, we've got unions, we've got organized labor unions, education, we've got social service agencies. We have a well-rounded group of individuals on this entity that come together quarterly and more often in smaller groups to really start working on and doing a lot more around this transitional discussion about what we can be doing to help our workers in the state. One of the things they did that has been such a remarkable thing in Wyoming, and the Next Gen Sector Partnership really it's nationwide. It's in a number of other states, but the individual that really starts these and that we've contracted with indicated that Wyoming was one of the quickest startup states. We were able to jump onto the bandwagon with this Next Gen Sector Partnership and really get these started quicker than any other state. And I think it's because Wyoming is small, it's nimble. We can really recognize what the need is and get things going a little bit quicker without the bureaucracy. And for those of you that don't know what Next Gen Sector Partnerships are, and we can certainly hook you up with the individual that's responsible for these because they're quite remarkable. They're industry-driven partnerships in various regions where industry comes together, and it's not the competition. They come together and they recognize in this area, we really need to ramp up what we can do for this area in this area. And what it does is ramp up the ability to grow that area for the workers in that area and for industry. So if what you'll notice here is in this southwest area, this is one of our strongest Next Gen Sector Partnerships, and it's manufacturing. And of course, that's one of our areas where we're going to be closing down some of our mines. And that area is doing some incredible things with developing some of the educational curriculums that they need to be able to assist some of these workers if they are displaced from or dislocated from their work. They've already got a number of programs in the college there that will be able to assist some of these workers, take some of their transferable skills and assist some of them in using those transferable skills, upskilling them with some of the educational services that they've got, and maybe placing them in some of these manufacturing jobs. You see where we've got a number of healthcare opportunities around the state. We had a co-worker that was dislocated from his job that actually came out of that job, decided that I don't know if it was a he or she, decided they wanted to go into nursing and very successfully went into a nursing career. And of course, that's, again, when you talk about the pay, you know, and the comparable pay, that certainly that's walking into a comparable pay situation. And construction in Wyoming is going to be booming in the next 10 years. So we've got several construction Next Gen Sector Partnerships that's doing the same thing around the state of Wyoming to really build up those sector partnerships. Again, to really assist some of these dislocated workers to step right into some of these opportunities that we've got around the state. So it's really an incredible group of individuals around the state, industry driven again, with some assistance and support from government that are making some real differences in the state of Wyoming. And then I also wanted to just talk to you about a real unique Wyoming program. This is a program that's actually funded off of we have two unemployment funds. We've got our state, we've got a fund that's actually the fund that is required through federal DOL, but then we also set up a state unemployment fund. And off that state fund, we get interest. And from that interest, we are able to fund a business training fund grant. What we've done with our those grant funds is we've been able to, you know, what you're hearing now is to keep your employees, you need to offer them career growth and offer them training opportunities for that career growth. So we've been able to offer that through these interest funds. So we've got business training grants, but we've also been able to develop a program. It's an internship program where what we've also been hearing from some of our businesses is if we can get interns into this program, we develop this relationship with these interns and we can keep them in the state and we can hire these interns. And we're hearing so much feedback from them that they're grabbing onto and holding those interns. Same with the apprentice programs. And again, those dislocated workers oftentimes can step into these internship programs. They can step into these apprenticeship programs and really use those as opportunities as a foot in the door to some of these other very good paying jobs. So these are some of the dollar figures that we have for some of these programs. They're really quite beneficial for business. We can pay up to $4,000 or $5,000 per trainee for a program, for a training program. So it's not just chicken feed. It's a pretty significant training amount with up to $200,000 per state fiscal year for business that helps to pay for tuition, registration, class materials, travel expenses to train that employee. So it's pretty significant funding. These pre-hire economic development grants, what these grants are actually for is to help our community colleges with developing programs. We've been developing CDL training programs. Again, that's transferable skill that can put individuals into very good positions with some truck driving jobs that we all know are paying some very good wages, and there's a lot of need out there in there. So it's been CDL, we've had CNA training that we all know is a pathway into healthcare programs. We've got some tech training going on. We've got healthcare, and I think that was the CNA training. And there was one other one that I'm forgetting right now. We have got a hospitality and tourism one that we've got started in this area too. So these are old numbers. As of 2021, we were able to train up 208 individuals in this healthcare field with this pre-hire economic development grant. So we've also got, this is a pretty significant one with this pre-hire grant. We were able to work with UW on this construction workforce training opportunity. And again, transferable skills for some of our dislocated workers on the mines. This is it. At UW, they're developing these certifications for this construction workforce training. Construction is booming in Wyoming and elsewhere, but in Wyoming, we I think in Laramie County alone, they're foreseeing in the next 5 years, and the numbers I've heard are 3,000 to 4,000, and I've actually heard up to 10,000 over the next 10 years. So we've got these modules that UW put together that we helped fund through this program. And they had an individual that is graduating from this program came and spoke to one of our workforce development council meetings. He had a job before he was ready to walk into a job before he even graduated. making some incredibly good money walking right into that job. So these are good paying jobs, and they're walking in with some excellent experience. Pre-obligation grants. What we do with this is we have a business that is coming into Wyoming, and they know that they need a skilled workforce when they walk in. So what we can do is work with our economic development entities throughout the state. And what we do is we find out, okay, how many employees do you need? What do you need to train them in? And then we work with them to pre-obligate some of these funds, set them aside, and help them and recognize for them that those monies are going to be there to and are obligated to train your employees if you come in and set your business up in Wyoming. So that money is there for you if you're going to set your business up in Wyoming. So again, it's an incredible business draw to get business into Wyoming. And these are some of the preferred industries that we really look to for that pre-obligation grant. Again, these are decided by the Workforce Development Council and business that we need across Wyoming. And internship grants. I cannot stress this enough. You get them in, you develop a relationship, they're going to stay in Wyoming. For us in Wyoming, that's critical. We need to develop those relationships. We don't need that brain drain. We need to keep people in Wyoming. And this is not just for your high school student. This is for your dislocated worker to get into a job. We can pay up to $25 an hour, depending on what the industry is that they want to step into, that they want to give a try. So if that person wants to step into a healthcare field, they want to step into an engineering field, and they want to get a little bit of experience in that, as long as that business will provide them with a structured learning experience, we can help pay for that experience as an intern. They don't have to be going to college. We can help them pay for that up to $25 an hour, 1,040 hours for them to get that experience, develop that relationship, develop some loyalty to that employer, and maybe stay with that employer as an employee once they get done with the rest of their training. And here's some of this is hard to read, and I apologize for that. And again, these are old numbers. This has probably tripled the number of interns that we've been providing opportunities to since we've increased the amounts of our internship funding. I would guess we're up to at least 400 interns now that we're serving and providing funding for, at least. And our apprenticeship grants, we've really improved the opportunities for those. We've been more flexible with what we're helping them do, and are really trying to ramp those up. We've got internships that we're growing. We've helped the Department of Education develop some internship opportunities for teachers, because we all know that there's teacher need out there. So we're doing that as well. An additional resource, and this is something that we've been, with our dislocated workers, we really have been focusing on, is this Boots website. Again, this is an opportunity for individuals to go into our workforce centers, to sit down, to put in what their transferable skills are. And this site will take you to what some of the jobs are that you are already qualified for, or what you could be qualified for with a little bit of additional training or certifications. It will tell you where that you can get those certifications or those additional educational opportunities. It will tell you where the jobs are in your region. It will tell you what the prospective income is for that job. And it will tell you what the job opportunities, how many opportunities for employment there are in that area. It is an incredible tool that we've really been pushing in our workforce centers for those dislocated workers that come in, so we can help them out with. So they recognize that all is not lost. We have opportunities for you. We have ways for you to really start hitting the ground running right away, to start looking right away, if you are a dislocated worker. So that's just kind of a real quick run through. I hope I didn't go over my time, but we've just got a lot of opportunities going on in Wyoming that we are hoping we're getting through to our communities, our coal impacted communities. And that's our biggest problem actually, is letting those communities know of all of the services that we do have to assist them right now. So every chance I get, I'm out there talking about all of these opportunities. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Thank you, Robin. I appreciate all this. Personally, I will definitely be reaching out to you. This was very helpful.
Great.
I know it looks like we'll have a time for a few questions at the very end, because Mayor Mike is unfortunately unable to join us today. And we have one more speaker I'm going to introduce here in a second, but just hang on to your questions, because we should have enough time to get to some questions afterwards. Let me go ahead and introduce Ms. Cecilia So. Cecilia is a DNA entrepreneur, consultant, and specializes in Indigenous leadership. She's taught leadership in China. She's worked across university campuses, developing programs and grants for Native Americans. She's also a trainer, evaluator for Strengthening Families, which is a federal program. She's currently working on her doctorate in leadership for change, focusing on Indigenous leadership, and she currently serves as the incubator director and senior business coach with the organization called Change Labs. So Cecilia, I am happy to turn it over to you now.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to everybody this morning. I do not have a PowerPoint because I just wanted to talk about where we could put our dollars to work for a greater impact in Indian country. So I've been in Farmington, New Mexico for the past 8 years. I was previously at the University of Utah, writing funding, writing grants, working with both the Native community and academia. So I love everything that I've been hearing this morning: collecting data, writing research, implementing funding, programs, internships. All of those are extremely impactful. Earlier this year, I went to South Korea and also worked with their government over there and looking at how we could what things we could implement in Indian country to build our economy. So one of the first areas that we really need funding for, in my opinion, is internet. So we have a lot of people living out on the reservation that don't have any access to internet whatsoever. I'm a huge fan of Starlink. You know, we've all watched Starlink make a great deal of impact in rural communities. So gaining access to the internet is the #1 thing, not only for education, but building your own businesses. Creating a smart city. Anywhere I went in South Korea, you had access to the internet. You could go through the tunnels or traveling or bullet trains. Everybody had internet, no matter where you went. It was extremely impressive. So I think the first area is creating internet access in Indian country. The other big area that I personally work in that I see a huge impact in is your mindset. Creating the mindset of being an entrepreneur, being a business owner, building an economy on tribal lands. A lot of times we have this mindset of, living in poverty. We're going to be poor. Our parents were poor. We're always going to be poor. That is not the mindset to building a business. So really creating trainings of how money works, being an entrepreneur and what that looks like. And then how do we leverage funding? What does that look like? If we have a little bit of funding here to invest, how do we invest that money? I also do a workshop called Your Relationship with Money. What is your relationship with money? How do you develop money? How does money flow? How does money work? All of those things are about building a mindset for being a business owner and creating a thriving business. Also, I just attended yesterday morning. I participated in a focus group that talked to 12 Native business owners and entrepreneurs. And what we talked to them about was, what type of access do you need? How do you work with a bank? How does your credit affect all of this? How do you rebuild your credit? How do you repair your credit? All of those things are extremely impactful in becoming a thriving business owner. So, and then working with a bank. I personally know my banker. I have a relationship with my banker. I can email my banker. Those are, really great relationships, partnerships to have when you have a business. You also need a CPA, an accountant, and it's always a good idea to have a lawyer to build a good business. So creating those relationships in your communities. And then also we need some financial literacy kind of from working on having an accounting system, working with software, working with bookkeepers, working with a CPA on how to build your business. Also, you need the training to read an income statement, profit and loss reports. What are you going to do if you actually do make a profit? What are you going to do with that funding? How are you going to reinvest that into building your business? The other area that I think is an extremely important area for Native communities, and I'm not just working with Navajo, but we work with Hopi. I've also done a lot of work in the Four Corners area with Jicarilla, Apache, Ute Mountain Ute. There's 22 tribes in the state of New Mexico, so there's a lot of work to be done in Indian country. But I call these programs that come in a kind of throw it over the fence programming, where you have some great programming that comes into Indian country, and then they come in, they do the training, and then they're gone. We need to be looking at long-term impact. So in Change Labs, we have relationship-based trainings. So as a business coach, I am coaching one-on-one with business owners on how to build their business. We've created curriculum this past year working with Change Labs, workbooks. It's culturally relevant material. So we're building a relationship. It's not just a one-time thing, but it's a long-term relationship, because we know that in businesses and building businesses, your business goes up and down, right? It's a ebb and flow of business. And especially when we hit COVID, that was a pretty rough time for our business owners. So having a business coach who is a Native business coach and understands the tribal economies and the policies and politics of having a business on tribal land. So those networks become extremely critical. One of the other places that I think is a really important area is trust building trust with outside businesses. It also can be, how are we working together with our border towns, because we know that a lot of the funding goes off into the border towns. So building trusts, creating networks, understanding banking. And what we really are looking at when someone like a coal miner, and it's not just a coal miner, but everybody in the coal industry, from administrative assistants all the way up to CEOs that are looking to retool their education. And that workforce, sometimes as Indigenous communities, we look at going back to our, being a jeweler or a silversmith or rug weavers, our traditional knowledge and how to start those kinds of businesses. But what I have found is that when you start talking to them, they want to do other things. And part of that is, how do you get somebody that is a jeweler to wanting to be a manufacturer of solar power or solar companies? We need not just one good solar company for Navajo Nation, but we need 10 solar companies across, the state of the size of West Virginia. So, and then up into Wyoming as well. But how do we get Navajo people or Native Indigenous people to start thinking about not just being jewelers, but actually running large companies, manufacturing, solar, renewable energy companies? I really think that we should be putting those efforts in creating a transition committee. It's really hard because politics always plays that role. And creating a tribal energy committee, putting a planning committee together. And it's not just the tribe itself, but bringing others into looking at that transition. I mean, I want to be green, right? Everybody wants to turn green today, but in reality, that's just not the reality of the way it works. So how are we going to build that plan over the next 10 years, 20 years, 100 years? What is that going to look like? We need that workforce to start moving towards that type of outcome. Let's talk about a 100-year plan. Let's put it together. I've seen on lots of websites, I've researched and looking at policy and energy plans, that there are some tribes that do have a great energy policy, energy plans, but it also is requires workforce and partnerships and networking. So it's really talking about building our own ecosystem and economy on tribal lands, on the reservations, border towns, and then statewide. How do we partner and collaborate on all of those levels, and really developing our own tribal energy transition plan with the tribe, but also with our state and federal levels. And to me, this is about, it takes time to create our own workforce. We've been in fossil for such a long time, and now we want to make this big shift over. So I think having these types of forums and bringing other conversations just like this into our own Indigenous communities is extremely important. And where are those dollars? The flow of money is coming. So where are those dollars going to be the most impactful? The work I'm doing in Change Labs and creating incubators, we're just recruiting the next 12 entrepreneurs coming in. I'd love to have 24 or 50 of these entrepreneurs coming in to get this type of training and one-on-one coaching to build these businesses on Navajo Nation and on Hopi Nation. So I know that was kind of a long-winded pitch there, but all of those areas I think are extremely critical in creating a new economy and a transition and partnerships not just we're out kind of on our own doing it by ourselves, but how we need to partner, collaborate, and work together. So was that my 8-minute stopwatch?
You have
Time
a couple
there.
more, you have a couple more minutes. If you have anything else to add, you have a couple more minutes. So please feel free to.
Well, as a past grant writer for the University of Utah and working in academia, I think it's also really critical that we put in, collecting the data, learning the impact. But to me, what does that look like? It means that we maybe have, an accountant that was in the coal mining systems for years and years that goes and says, okay, I want to create a business. I want to be an accountant. I want to live in Window Rock. I want to live on my own tribal lands and have the access to the internet and consult and work with natives on and off the reservation to build businesses, and tracking that person along the way and collecting the data. I've noticed when we work with business owners, it's a transition for them, right? Building the mindset, working on the tools, obtaining the skills, creating the networks, but it's a life journey, right? It's a long time journey. So it's not this throw it over the fence process. We really need long-term relationship building with our communities, and then creating those plans and how we're going to roll that out on and off reservations with. I think we should be working with our border towns, because that's where the large amount of dollars are being impacted. And if you take that away or cut that off, it's impacting both communities, the tribal community and the border towns themselves, and the state as well. Yeah, that's kind of all I have.
Thank you. I really do appreciate too your focus on, you called it relationship-based training and coaching with culturally relevant material. And I think there's so much to learn about that relationship piece, because oftentimes we're creating programs that are kind of more cookie cutter focused. And I like the idea of engaging people in a way that's relevant and relationship based in order to build something that's more useful, more interesting, and easier to connect with.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing, Cecilia. Now is a time that we can have a question and answer period. As I mentioned, Mayor Mike's not joining us, so we've got lots of time and space for questions. So I've got a couple in the chat, so please feel free to raise your hand on Zoom if you know how to do that. If you don't, send me a chat directly or send Suzanne a chat, and we'll make sure that your question gets included. Let's see. I do have one question to get us going for Robin. Robin, how can other states get programs like Boots?
Oh, great idea. This was done through an NGA, a National Governors Association grant program. And the Boots program was actually, I don't know if you've heard of MZ Burning Glass. That entity actually helped put it together. And I mean, gathering the information they gathered was just phenomenal. I mean, and the data that they pulled together was phenomenal. So I would certainly be happy to get the name of the contact for them and get that out to you. And I know they'd love to start getting to work for you. They're great to work with, and the Boots side is, I just can't say enough about it. The information you can get from there is just invaluable.
Excellent. Thank you so much. One more question for you, Robin. Would you recommend a volunteer economic development group And does it help to have the governor's backing on something like that?
A volunteer economic development group, in what sense, do you think? In what sense?
Not quite sure.
You want me to jump in, Shelley?
Yeah.
So I think you mentioned the 34 people, economic development. Is it a was it a workforce council or something that was people were hand selected by the governor? But it's voluntary and they meet quarterly or something like that. It sounds like a very inexpensive way for a state to be proactive on these issues. So I was wondering if that's something, you know, is that it's voluntary, right? So does it go well, and do people spend enough time, and you know, are they having impact?
Yeah. They have huge impact. And like I say, it's a part of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, but it is volunteer and it goes very well. And that group works together incredibly well on topics that are of interest and importance to the entire state. So they are able to pull back of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act funds that we get from DOL. 15% of those funds go to that group. So they get to use those funds to fund initiatives across the state. And so they get to, you have industry and volunteers deciding what are some of the most important things across the state that they want to focus on. And it's really remarkable to see some of the things they do. One of the neat things, for instance, they did this Road Trip Nation last year, that they picked 4 young people across the state of Wyoming, and they had this really cool bus, and they had these 4 individuals going across the state of Wyoming, stopping at different stops along the way, talking to young people across the state of Wyoming about, you know, what their hopes and dreams for staying in Wyoming were, and what their, you know, career aspirations were. And, you know, they're young people, you know, they were able to really connect with them. And it was really kind of and then we had photographers and, you know, a media team following them. So it was really kind of a neat thing. And then, you know, we did a PR thing around it. And that was along with our partner, our Department of Education partners. So kind of a neat thing. And that was part of the funding for that was this group. So I would recommend something like that if you don't already have it. It's pretty neat. It's a pretty neat group of people.
And the funding you were saying was 15% of a grant that you got from the U.S. Department of Labor?
Yeah.
Okay. And was that one of the grants that Molly was talking about?
No, this is the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. So this is the WIOA funds that come in that stand up the workforce centers across the state. That I think every state get, you know, that help with the dislocated workers, that help with you know, and different states do it differently, but this is just how Wyoming has done it. And great things come out of that group, I'd have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Another question in the chat. I hear a lot of criticism that workforce development programs are ineffective and a waste of money. What simple and non-academic resources or examples of success do you recommend to counter this?
Oh, great question. I think that question comes from the fact that the funds, the parameters around those funds are very tight, and the funds have to be used for a certain demographic of people. And a lot of times that demographic and a lot of times it's not necessarily that demographic of people I don't want to say that need it that bad, but that demographic of people needs to be widened, I would say. There are many more people that could be benefiting from those funds, in my view. So I guess if I could wave my magic wand, that's what I would say should happen. Now, what we're doing with some of the ARPA funds is we're recognizing there's that gap. There's that gap of people that have been affected by COVID and that can't get any of those WIOA funds, but they need help. They need assistance. And we're trying to use ARPA funds to fill that gap. And I'd really like to see and maybe bring some data to DOL up, in fact, at some point to say, here's how that helped that group of people. And maybe that provides some data to say that those WIOA funds should be increased somewhat. But I will also say, here's an example. You know, when we had one of our mines literally shut down overnight, and we had 500 people, 500 coal miners literally out of work overnight. They couldn't pay for health care. They couldn't pay for some of their they couldn't pay their mortgages. They couldn't pay for rent. Those are things WIOA will not pay for in most circumstances. Those are the basic things of living. You know, that's shelter over your head. And WIOA will not pay for that. There are circumstances where waivers need to be allowed to pay for those types of circumstances. So I would say allowances for those types of things need to be made at certain times. So I you know, and we all know that there's circumstances where waivers need to be allowed. So that's another you know magic wand I would wave.
Robin, thank you for that. I just had one quick question about your programs. Do you all have like outreach and marketing strategies that you use, or is it something that you wait for people to come utilize your services when they need it?
Oh my gosh, that is such an excellent, and I beat my head against the wall about this, and I have since day one in this position. We have started, like I said, every opportunity I get to go out and just shout from the rooftops about the programs we have and how we can help out. And I'm not the only one saying this by any stretch. We have so many programs that can help people that people have no idea about. And I would say that's Department of Family Services with a lot of their programs as well. I would say that that's Department of Health with their services as well. But you know, with our federal funds, we cannot use those funds for marketing. We can't use those funds, most of them, to really talk about what those services are. So it's got to be word of mouth. It's got to be, I mean, we even have a hard time drafting brochures to talk about what it is we can do. So we're out across the state trying to spread the word about those. So again, that's another thing that I think we need to have a certain amount of dollars for marketing. And some programs, some limited programs will do that. But for the most part, they do not. And people just don't know. And that's tragic, because there are funds available for a lot of different things that people are really, really needing right now.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you. I see Carlin with your hand up. Is it regarding a question that's in the chat?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
go ahead.
Sorry. Cecilia, I was just wondering how you recruit people for the entrepreneurship programs that you do at Change Labs.
That's good. We just did a round. We got 34 applications. And so our funding is restricted to only businesses on tribal lands. So we get people from actually Navajos from Washington, Phoenix, Flagstaff, Albuquerque. We get out of state. We've had some from California. Unfortunately, they don't meet the eligibility. So it's either on Navajo Nation or on Hopi Nation. We have a huge marketing and go through social media quite a bit, but also through our website. Navajo is fortunate as far as a tribal community because we have all the chapter houses. So we contact 110 chapter houses. There are 12 villages with Hopi Nation. We connect with them. And then we host a lot of these, kind of Q&A Zoom calls and try to reach out. We do a lot of footwork in the community when we go to flea markets or the arts markets and things like that. The research has shown us that for the coal companies, you may have one coal worker, but they're supporting 10 to 12 family members. So that's a huge impact when you're working with one person and building, there is this thing about, building generational wealth. So you may be training and working with one tribal member, but they're teaching their family within the home. So the impact is much bigger than we realize. So we do a lot of outreach in workshops like this focus group. We pulled in a bank, Nucinda Credit Union out of Albuquerque and Phoenix. And we host those types of kind of information sessions.
Thanks. And just to follow up more for my curiosity, is the program free for participants and all the funding comes from you all, from Change Labs?
Yes, so it's absolutely free that they are joining this cohort. It's a 6-month program. It was a 1-year program. I've condensed it down to 6 months. 6 months goes very quickly. The incubator startup, they get all the tools that they need. We're actually helping them develop their own business book. I haven't seen anything like that out there. Everything from registering their business with the state to registering with the tribe, which is actually a 24-step process. Insane, right? It's an 8-step process to do that with the state level. And then, so they go through the incubator program and we help them build logos, websites, packaging, branding, all of those things with native designers. And then we have a graduation process where they present and do their pitch. And then once they graduate that program, they're actually eligible for a $10,000 loan. We don't give free money because we want them to learn how their credit works, how to build their business, how to level up. And then they can actually go into the next program, which is called a kinship loan program. And we bring in accountants, bookkeepers, speakers, all of those kinds of things. And then they learn the accounting and financial process for 6 months. Eventually, we're working on a venture capital program. So some funding is coming down that we want those businesses that are in the upper levels of being in business for quite a few years to get up to between $50,000 and $150,000 loan. So it actually doesn't cost them anything to be a part of these cohorts.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Cecilia, what would you say is Change Labs cost per participant in that program?
That's a good question. We say that they get a $2,000 services. So we also bring in native lawyers that they can talk to if they're doing trademarking or patents on their products. So they have access to that. We call it Create and Elevate, where we all come together for a week and then they work on their logos and branding and all of those things, marketing, social media, websites. So that takes a great deal of funding, and they earn tokens along the way that they can spend on like biopic photography, the website stuff, and different services that will help them grow their business. I personally think, don't quote me on this, I know this is recorded, but to put somebody through the whole program, you know, is at least over $10,000 each. That's why we have a limited cohort. I think we are building the capacity to have much larger cohorts. They have to be ready to do the work too. So it actually takes 123 hours to graduate the program. So I'm in the process of trying to get our program, you get a certificate from Diné College, Navajo Technical University, and then Northland Pioneer College, because that's who the Hopi work with, because I think they should be earning college credits. This is a high level programming. It's not, you know, that throw it over the fence kind of stuff. It's a much longer term, and I'd like to see our members get some college credits and be certified business owners.
Nice.
I think Pam has her hand up too. Yeah, Pam.
Off mute. I wanted to just switch gears a little bit because I was hoping Molly could speak a little bit to the framework that she flashed up at the end of her talk. Because I think thinking about how do we do this or is there a framework or steps we can follow could be really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I'm beginning to talk, I'm realizing that we need to create like an executive summary version of this because that's a tough page to share. But the goal behind the framework, and I should note, it's geared towards infrastructure investments and building pathways for infrastructure careers for these place-based investments. But the focus is on, it's a three-part thing, building those partnerships. There's a planning process once you've built partnerships that are community-based, that reflect worker voice, that incorporate workers into that planning process. And then the third step from there is building out and focusing on proven programs that we know focus on equitable workforce development strategies, build longevity, build sustainability in your workforce, and also embed a focus on equity and job quality within those good jobs. And again, focusing on infrastructure sectors. But as I'm giving this brief spiel, and while it's focused on infrastructure in this context, these three tenets of partnership development planning and proven programs are very easily scaled to focus on any given sector. It's really about developing your core team and coming together, building that trust, building relationships, and building, again, that core team that's going to work with the knowledge, with the experience, with the trust of that community, and working together in tandem to, again, build sustainability, build economic mobility for that community. And again, just create a community working in one step, working as one for mutual benefit, and I guess accounting for any number of economic upsets, any number of economic transitions, and also being prepared, again, holistically for new opportunities as they come federally through the states, and just building towards a more resilient, I'll say, a more resilient economic future for these place-based partnerships.
That sounds really wonderful. And I guess I know, having been on these calls for weeks and years now, you know, the capacity of the local community to put those kind of partnerships and relationships together, and then to get the grant money and all of that is limited, and a part of the real problems that communities have in accessing federal funds and programs. Does this framework apply to how the DOL is going to work with communities? Is there capacity on the federal side to help foster this framework? But what does it mean for how you guys do your job there?
Yeah, so I should note, and I mentioned that it's focused on infrastructure, and it's really about preparing states, locals, community-based organizations for federal investments that are coming not just out of DOL, but more
Right.
so out of these larger investments. So big infrastructure investments that are coming out of energy, coming out of transportation, and the many hundreds of billions of dollars flowing through there. FEMA, EPA, any number of agencies and departments. And I will say, and also commerce is a huge one that I didn't mention. Of the numerous opportunities that are coming out of these various departments and agencies, some of them have those funds attached that offer that capacity building sort of at the front end. And those investments are structured specifically to allow for that sort of, I'll say, elongated sort of cadence where you're making those relationships, you're engaging on the front end before you just jump into a project. You are purposely engaging partners, you're creating a sector strategy, you're laying that foundation for some genuinely impactful work as this sort of cohort moves forward. But I can't say that for all of the investments, which is also why we as DOL have taken it upon ourselves to sort of create that framework outside of just those individual investments, so that that sort of roadmap is available so people can conceivably take that upon themselves in advance of these investments coming down, so that while we know that capacity building and just having the ability to do your regular job in addition to becoming a grant writer, becoming a relationship manager is a tall task to ask of anyone. We're hoping to be able to give people the tools well in advance so that hopefully we can mitigate some of that that crunch that communities often feel trying to build capacity, trying to prepare to be able to apply and benefit from some of these opportunities once they begin to drop.
Thank you, Molly. Thank you. Suzanne, it sounds like you had a couple things that you wanted to add before we wrap up. I would just definitely like to thank everybody for their time here today. And I believe contact information for the presenters and bios and everything is included in email from Carlin and Suzanne.
Yeah, thank you to all of our speakers. You included, Shelley, and thank you also for moderating.
Yeah.
So this has been such a helpful session. I learned so much about programs I did not know about. So thank you very, very much. And like Shelley said, we will email you all the bios for our speakers and everyone's contact information who has registered. So let us know if you don't want your contact information on that, but that way you'll be able to get a hold of each other and follow up with questions. And we will also do some follow-up conversations after this. I know Molly and maybe Cecilia and others would be willing to share more information and kind of go more into depth with people who are kind of focused on what they're focused on. So we can have two separate kind of more participatory discussion-based webinars in 2023. I think that would be great. And I know there's some other speakers as well who people have been asking if they could do follow-up conversations. So we will definitely facilitate those in the future. Our next session is next Tuesday, and that's our very last one for the 2022 Energy Transition Academy on December 13th. That'll be a discussion webinar, like I said before, and Governor Ritter will lead us in a wrap-up conversation there. And we started this series, our third series, about a month ago, and I hope that these webinars have been helpful for you all. And like Robin said, they're pretty unique, and they really do help people understand what's going on in other states and in their state and understand the transition better. So thank you, Robin, for joining, even though you were advised not to. We are very lucky to have you, and so is Wyoming. And I have to say that I'll miss learning from people on a regular basis like we have been over the last month. So feel free to shoot us an email with questions or recommendations, suggestions. And like I said, before Thursday's webinar, you will receive an email with the speaker bios and people's contact information. So thanks again.
Tuesday's webinar.
Sorry, Tuesdays. Next Tuesday, December 13th. You'll get a reminder from Carlin because she's very good at that. Thank you, Carlin. And just thanks again. We'll see you guys on Tuesday. Have a great rest of your week.